Greetings, respected viewers. I am George from Ireland. Here I am in front of Clarence House in Richmond upon Thames, London. So Clarence House is so called because it was built for the Duke of Clarence, who later became King William IV. So William IV, he was a son of King George III. He was one of his younger sons, but won't go into it. George III's eldest son, well, he died, and by that time his daughter had died, had no sons, and anyway, another second son had died without any legitimate children. So the crown eventually passed to William IV, who became king in 1830. The Sailor King, as he was known, because of his enthusiasm for all matters nautical. So he lived here. The title Duke of Clarence, some people claim it is a cursed title. There was George, Duke of Clarence, who was executed by his brother Edward IV in the Wars of the Roses. He was not drowned in a butt of Malmsey wine, as Will Shakespeare would have you believe. And there was another Duke of Clarence, Prince Eddie, as he was known as. Actually, his name was Albert Victor, who died of pneumonia in the 1880s. He was Queen Victoria's eldest grandson. Okay, so what else about Clarence House? Anyway, William IV moved out of here eventually to go to Bushy Park, about 5 miles south of here, to live with his mistress, Dorothea Jordan, an Irish actress who was very keen on playing breeches roles, as in she dressed as a man. And in those days it was thought very daring and also very, how to put it, what's the word? Stimulating, arousing to see a woman dressed as a man, and also revealing her legs all the way up to her knees, which otherwise would have been far too indelicate for a woman to do. Women would have just been allowed on the stage shortly before that, and there are very few female roles. Anyway, he had 10 children with her, 5 daughters and 5 sons. He gave 9 of them names of his own siblings, and all the surname Fitz-Clarence. Fitz meaning illegitimate son of or daughter of. Not being rude using the word illegitimate, but that was the technical term, as in born outside of wedlock. William IV was married, but he had no children with his wife. But anyway, he moved out of here, and it became a Catholic school for a while. And famously, this is where Bernardo O'Higgins went to school, the man who led the Chilean campaign for independence. So Bernardo O'Higgins was born in Santiago de Chile in 1772. His father, Ambrosio O'Higgins, was an Irishman in the service of the Crown of Spain and was there as the governor of Chile. But Bernardo O'Higgins was born outside of matrimony as well. His mother was from an upper-class Chilean family. Bernardo never met his father, though his father gave him a subvention to live off, arranged for him to go to study in Lima at the age of 15. Bernardo, he went to Spain, and he came here to London, and he went to this Catholic school. Obviously, there was a lot of anti-Catholic prejudice at the time. It was coming up to 1780, the Gordon riots, when the Catholic Relief Bill was proposed, as in removing some of the legal disabilities imposed on us. Lord George Gordon, one of the younger sons of the Duke of Gordon, he sat for Inverness as a member of Parliament, and he led a huge campaign against it, saying this was an absolute betrayal of Protestantism, and there were large-scale riots. Dozens of people were killed by troops. Many buildings were burnt down, including Catholic embassy chapels. But nonetheless, this school was allowed to exist. That was some time before Bernardo O'Higgins came here. Towards the end of his teenage years, spent about 3 years here in Richmond. So obviously his mother tongue was Spanish. He learnt Latin, a bit of French at school, learned a tiny bit of English here. That was that, not a huge school. Anyway, it later became a private residence, this house. Brian Blessed, the actor, owned it in the 70s. It was sold a few years ago for £14.5 million. What else about Bernardo O'Higgins? Well, yeah, he returned to Chile. When the Napoleonic Wars, the King of Spain abdicated. He was feeble-minded, and Napoleon, the Emperor of the French, he put his eldest brother Joseph on the throne of Spain, which obviously meant he ruled all the land from California to Tierra del Fuego back then. Madrid had more or less lost control over its Latin American territories at that stage. Therefore, but some people in these Spanish colonies could rebel against Madrid on the basis they were rebelling against the French occupation and not against the rightful King of Spain. So, but the rebel they did, and Joseph II, who was King of Spain, you know, the Bonaparte, he really had no control over the overseas Spanish colonies, pretty soon losing control of Spain itself with this guerrilla warfare, and indeed the word guerrilla was invented in Spain at the time, little war. So it was a particularly brutal conflict. I mean, war has obviously got to involve killing people, but this was especially sadistic, as in mutilating wounded prisoners and so on, showing no quarter. Soon he wouldn't leave Madrid, eventually wouldn't leave his palace, and finally had to flee. But then these South American countries like Chile, they got used to self-government, so when the legitimate king of Spain was restored, they were not in the habit of taking orders from Madrid any longer. And now there were some people who were Chileans or from other South American countries who remained loyal to Spain, said let's keep the empire united. There was fighting there, but eventually the cause of Latin American independence prevailed. There were not so many Latin American countries at the time. There was Gran Colombia. Colombia back then included what's now Panama, for example. Several Central American countries are united. So Bernardo O'Higgins, he was the first director of Chile. It wasn't called president in that time. So he served for several years, and eventually he was pushed out from power. He retired to Lima, where he'd spent his early adolescence, and indeed he died there in 1842. So that is Bernardo O'Higgins. So he's memorialized with a statue in County Sligo, which is where his father came from. His father being made a marquis by the King of Spain. So that is an astonishing quirk about Richmond upon Thames.